You may know this, before the Buddha passed away, the monks and devotees who were attained a certain level of wisdom and practice, they were able to accept, the Buddha's condition that he was going to die, very peacefully. And of course, they had compassion. But many of the monks and lay devotees did not have that level of practice and wisdom. So they were still had, emotional attachment, because it's a part of our human condition. Some of them were very sad, some of them were crying and pleading with the Buddha not to die. So he said, have I not been teaching you that all things are impermanent, right? Even those who are dear to us, we have to die one day, or we have to go away somewhere. So he said, you have to be an island unto yourself. They said, how can we manage, when you leave us, because you have been such a great teacher. How will we manage? And he said, you have to be an island unto yourself. You have to be a lamp, a light unto yourself. Now the ones who are wise, they knew what he meant. But of course there were others who did not have this understanding. So they said, oh, but great teacher, how can we be an island unto yourself? How can we be a light unto yourself, as you have said? He said, by practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So he reminded them that it's this essential practice that we become more self-sufficient. Because as you know, you can listen to so many Dhamma talks, you can read so many books, you can even have a PhD in Buddhism, but unless you practice mindfulness, you will never really understand the essence of the 4 Noble Truths. And whenever we had any types of discussions or debates with different people who had different beliefs, different philosophies, and so on, he always came back to this one point. He said, I only teach one thing, the truth of dukkha, mental, emotional suffering, conflict. And the ending of dukkha, he always came back to this one point. And of course, it's through the practice of mindfulness, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Now, I would just like to do a reading first. Mindfulness is a skillful way of relating to and connecting to life and daily experience. It is paying attention on purpose in the present moment and in a non-judgmental way. It is a way of being, and it takes practice. It is calm attention to what is happening in the present moment without discrimination or criticism. It is the observing power of the mind that sees without the filter of desire or aversion, liking or disliking, or delusional reaction. It is therefore a wholesome way of seeing what is happening in the present moment. Mindful breathing brings the mind home to the body. You begin to experience calmness, a sense of quiet well-being and quiet joy. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. This helps our concentration and focus, and we begin to appreciate the fact of being alive instead of being distracted and confused by compulsive thinking. This knowing, of course, is intuitive knowing. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I am breathing out. This is intuitive knowing, not intellectual knowing. Because intellectual knowing is based on thinking and memory, right? And of course information, all the knowledge, information. But this intuitive knowing is what the Buddha points to, part of our Buddha nature. It's just like when you're hungry or tired, you know you're hungry or tired, right? And of course, if you have to go to the washroom, you know you have to go. It's a natural intelligence. You don't need a university degree to figure that out. It's a natural intelligence. Another good example is if you're driving, you have to pay attention, right? And you know when to stop, when to turn right, when to turn left. And if you want to overtake someone, you know when to do it, if it's safe enough. And of course, if you know it's not safe enough, you don't try to overtake someone. Or of course, if you have to change lanes. I don't know if you have multi-lane highways in KL. You have a few, I think, right? And of course, the perfect example of this is just crossing the road. You look right, you look left, you look right, and you know when it's safe to cross, right? Intuitive knowing. Because if you don't use this intuitive knowing, you get into trouble. So this knowing, intuitive knowing, is something very, very important. So this practice makes the mind so clear, so simple. Because the more we think and the more we read and the more we study, in the academic world, actually we become more confused. And this is why when I'm in the university environment, I like to mention that the Buddha did not have a PhD in Buddhist philosophy or, Buddhism. Because wisdom and mindfulness has nothing to do with knowledge, academic book knowledge. Of course, the professors don't like to hear that. Because a professor, in a university environment, is very close to God. And when I speak to professors and, university students who are at least A or A+ average, very bright students, it's very hard for them to accept that they all suffer from ignorance and delusion. Because, they think they're very smart. And of course, academically they are, but they lack very little wisdom. And of course, you would tell them, that they're all nonsense, and they have permanent head damage, which is what PhD means, permanent head damage. You see how they get very upset. I said, that's ignorance and delusion. The ego, right? When the ego becomes, hurt, becomes damaged or becomes threatened. That is ignorance and delusion. I continue. Mindful walking helps us to be in the present moment, and we can appreciate the beauty of the environment. We can stop and smell the roses and enjoy and experience the joy of just being alive. Mindful eating in silence is a peaceful activity, and we can appreciate the food much more. When we're eating and talking, what we're talking about becomes more important than the food. The food becomes a secondary thing. Mindful cleaning, cooking, and washing helps us to enjoy doing these activities instead of being in a hurry to finish them so that we can do other things. Present moment, wonderful moment. With mindfulness and calm focus, we can deal with our own suffering, are anxiety, fear and worry, frustration, irritation, anger, resentment, sadness and sorrow. You can embrace your mental, emotional upset and take care of it with compassion, kind acceptance and patience. Mindful breathing can also help us to stop thinking about the past with regret and guilt, and stop thinking about the future with anxiety, fear, and uncertainty. We're able to experience tranquility and stillness, which is most beneficial and precious in our busy and stressful lives. And as you know, when we're very busy and our minds are very preoccupied, the present moment has very little meaning. It's only when you calm down and you begin to practice and feeling more relaxed, then we can appreciate the present moment. It's the same, you could be in a very beautiful place, even spectacularly beautiful, but if your mind is preoccupied, or of course if you're busy looking at your smartphone, you cannot appreciate the beauty in front of you. Very interesting. You see it, but you don't see it, as they say. And of course, when you're emotionally upset about something, it doesn't matter where you are. You're caught in that energy of the emotion. So to really appreciate the beauty of the environment, what's in front of us, we have to be very present. We have to be very receptive. Only then can we really see the beauty, the wonder of nature. For example, every time I come back to Malaysia, one of the first things that attracts me are these large rain trees. The rain trees you have here. I wonder how many of you still look at the rain trees, or you just take them for granted. But when I see those rain trees, I'm always full of awe and wonder, because trees are really wonderful, wonderful things. And to see all the, the orchids and the ferns, all the different types of ferns you have here. Sometimes I think it's human nature. Sometimes you have to leave your country, your environment. Say if you go to Canada and experience one or two really cold winters, and only when you come back here you really appreciate the beauty, the wonder of Malaysia and the nature. And the same thing with Canada. Sometimes you have to leave Canada in order to really appreciate Canada. And sometimes you can really appreciate the winter also, and the beauty of snow and even ice. But you have to be warmly dressed. Mindfulness has the power to heal past traumas and conflicts because it is a state of non-duality. And so one is able to be objective and see things as they are without identifying with them and let them go. I'll speak more about this non-duality. Mindfulness also helps us not to react to unpleasant words and situations, and not to take things so personally. A great deal of our mental energy is caught up in habitual reactions. It is our reactions which make us burn out, which throws us off balance and causes suffering and discontent, dis-ease. Things get better in our lives when we react less and less. We can remain calm and patient, wise, strong, and secure. Then we can respond in a beneficial way and be helpful to others. Then we can respond in a beneficial way and be helpful to others. And with mindfulness, we begin to appreciate the difference between reacting and responding. Because normally, our reactions are so habitual. because it's a part of our human conditioning from early age. We're just taught to always to be reacting. Labeling, judging, criticizing, comparing, condemning, liking, not liking, wanting, not wanting. And if things are unpleasant, or people are being unpleasant, or they try to do you harm, there's aversion, hatred, ill will, resentment, and so on. And of course, when we compare ourselves to others, very often we experience envy and jealousy, which causes suffering, conflict in the mind. And it has been said that life is really 10% of things happening, events happening, and 90% of our reacting. And when you look at it, you realize how true this is. Most of our lives are just reacting to situations. And our reactions, of course, is what creates our reality. And this is something that the Buddha realized, of course. And this is why he gave this very radical and very challenging teaching when he said, when you see, just see. When you hear, just hear. It sounds simple, but it's very challenging, isn't it? It's not easy to practice, because we're so conditioned to be reacting all the time. Labeling, judging, comparing, criticizing, as we said, liking, not liking, wanting, not wanting, jumping to conclusions, having views and opinions, and so on. And this is why there's so much negativity in the world. And you can see it in the media, even on social media, on the internet, so much negativity. It's because of the judgmental mind. And that's why we suffer so much from guilt. I spoke about this last week, last Sunday morning. Guilt is something that is so universal. And yet it is so unnecessary. Because as human beings, we make mistakes. And it is natural to have regrets. Things we have done, things we have said, and sometimes we regret, not doing certain things or not saying certain things. That's very natural. But if we keep regretting and feeling guilty about our mistakes, we end up just torturing ourselves. And this is why it's important when we make mistakes, we have to forgive ourselves for being human. Because as human beings, we are not perfect. But because of our social conditioning, we think we ought to be perfect. But we are human beings. And everyone makes mistakes. Everyone. Including monks. Even famous monks. Because we're human. So you can say that it's perfectly natural to make mistakes. And this is why the practice of loving kindness is so beneficial in dealing with guilt. And of course other conflicts and negativity. Because when we do loving kindness, we replace those negative judgmental thoughts with kind, positive thoughts. It's very, very beneficial. Yeah, in North America, this is a big problem, and I'm sure it's here. It's a universal affliction in the human condition. A lot of guilt. And people take things so personally. I see this in North America. People take everything so personally. Even things that are not directly related to them, somehow they take it personally. And when you think of it, it's such a, it's just a crazy conditioning, social conditioning that people are brought up with. And this is where all our mental defilements and suffering comes from. the conditioning that we all have. Reacting, judging, comparing, liking, not liking, condemning. You are all caught in this. Even Siddhartha Gautama had this conditioning. He had mental defilements, but he understood the nature of them. When he became enlightened, and with great effort, he was able to purify his mind of these mental defilements. And this is why when we investigate the Dhamma, you see how challenging it is, because it goes against our social conditioning and also our habit of identifying with everything. Because we identify with everything, whether it's physical, whether it's mental or emotional. And physical includes, of course, the physical body, other people, material things, and so on. And of course, our feelings, moods, emotions, or thoughts, or mental formations, my idea, my opinions, my views, my beliefs. We identify with all this, and we cling to them. And it's a very unfortunate conditioning that we have as human beings, because whatever we identify with, they are not permanent. Do you see that? Whatever we identify with, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, they're all impermanent, and subject to change, unsatisfactoriness, uncertainty. So this is why it has been said, if you could put all of the Buddha's teaching, all of it, all the suttas, in just one sentence, think of it, just one sentence, it will be this: nothing should be clung to or grasped at as me or mine. Nothing should be identified with as me or mine. That is all of the Buddha's teaching in just one sentence. But again, it's very challenging, because we're conditioned to identify with everything, including my happiness, my problems, my mistakes, my conflicts, my disappointments, my fears, and so on, of course, my body. Later I'll be speaking about how the Buddha was able to find a cure for birth, sickness, aging, and death. It's a very profound teaching. And also, when we react, and especially when we get upset or anxious or frustrated or worried, our minds become very confused. We're thrown off balance. Whereas if we learn not to react, just to keep calm, just to keep patient, then we're able to respond in a very beneficial way. Can you see the difference? Because if I'm always reacting, getting all worked up, as it were, our minds are not really present, because we're so caught up, we're so deluded by these reactions. Of course, sometimes we react in a pleasant way. We feel happy if things are pleasant. But if things are unpleasant, then of course we get very upset, frustrated, confused, etc., etc. So we're not able to respond in a very beneficial way. Say if somebody is in need, or a child is in danger, right? You can respond. And you begin to appreciate the difference between reacting and responding. Acting in a beneficial way. Our lives are not determined by what happens to us, but by how we react to what happens. Not by what life brings to us, but by our attitude we bring to life. The world is as it is. Life is constantly changing and uncertain. A calm and positive attitude causes a chain reaction of positive thoughts, events, and outcomes. It is a catalyst, a spark that creates extraordinary and surprising results. Events do not cause us suffering. They may cause us physical discomfort or some inconvenience and delay. It is our mental, emotional reaction to those events that causes us suffering. Upset, anger, frustration, irritation, anxiety, and despair. Without mindfulness, we are enslaved and deluded by mental activity, by too much thinking. This is a source of dukkha, mental emotional disturbance. We believe that to follow our impulses and to satisfy our desires and expectations is freedom. But this is an illusion. In fact, we are slaves to craving, clinging, frustration, fear, and despair. In mindfulness, one is not only restful, calm, and happy, but alert and awake. Meditation is not an evasion or escape. It is a clear and serene encounter with reality. The secret of life is revealed when we are living in harmony with the changes and motions of life, when we are not constantly struggling to change what is happening or what is. Patience and acceptance are the key to peace, compassion, wisdom, and freedom. We can skillfully deal with our thoughts and emotions. With objective awareness of our mental landscape, we can see thoughts and feelings as just thoughts and feelings. Moods and emotions are as just moods and emotions. We can see and understand their impermanent, changing, and uncertain nature, and can therefore let them go, thus freeing the mind of suffering and dis-ease. Now, what does it mean to see thoughts and feelings as just thoughts and feelings? Because initially, it's not easy to see thoughts and feelings as just thoughts and feelings, right? Because normally, we are caught up in the stories, all the stories, and mini dramas and worries and fears and cravings and frustrations that are created by our thoughts. I'm sure you've noticed that, because that's just the nature of thinking and images. They're always creating stories. It does those television dramas, the ones from Hong Kong and Korea. And you know, when you're involved in them and you know the stories and you know the characters, they seem very real. Believe me, I know what it is. Because I once got involved in a TV drama. And initially I never thought that would have been possible. Because normally, you know, they're very slow moving. And I thought, how boring. But while waiting for 2 long years, you know, to get to go to Sri Lanka to do some development work, I was visiting my sister for a few days, and she was watching one of these TV dramas. In North America, they're called soap operas. Because the first ones, they were sponsored by soap company, you know, soap and detergent companies. That's why they're called soap operas. And then this one thing I was watching, because I was so bored waiting for 2 years, and there was a character in this one story, and she was really cunning, very conniving. And you know from experience, the goody-goody characters are not that interesting. It's the ones that are, more conniving. They are the ones, those characters are far more interesting. And this one character was so good, I thought, I have to watch tomorrow. And I got hooked. And as you know, the more you watch, you begin to know all the other characters, and you get really involved. I couldn't believe it, that I would get, addicted to one of these things, but I did. So I understand that addiction. And it also has to do with human curiosity. You just want to know what happens tomorrow or next week. Although it can be very boring, can be very, slow moving, but it's just that human curiosity. You got to watch what happens to this character or that character. So the mind is like this. We're often caught up in the mind-created movies, and they seem very real. So that's actually an example of delusion. We're deluded by these mind-created stories. And of course, sometimes they're drama, they're mini dramas, and sometimes they have anxiety, fear, desires, and so on. So we don't see thoughts as just thoughts. We're just caught up in what thoughts and images are created. That's just the nature of delusion. But when we start to practice mindfulness, and there's a noting method, I mentioned this last Sunday, I think, where when you're caught up in a story or a drama, or something that's creating fear or anxiety or upset, you just say in your mind, thinking, thinking, thinking. Some of you might be aware of this. And when you do that, thinking, 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 and you come back to present moment awareness, it helps you to get out of the story or the drama, and you realize it's just thinking. I wonder if you see this. Just thinking, thinking, thinking. You realize it's not real. The stories, the dramas, the worries, the fears, the anxieties that is being created, they're only thoughts. It helps us to get out of the contents of those thoughts and images, and you see they're only thoughts. Thoughts as just, it's a very liberating experience. And this practice has been very beneficial in my own practice. And as you know, when we begin to practice, we begin to realize that thoughts have no permanent, solid reality. They are impermanent, right? Coming and going. They're empty. They're empty of anything permanent. And sometimes you can even add, it's only thinking, thinking, thinking. So you can write that down somewhere and put a star beside it. Only thinking, thinking, thinking. It's a very useful practice in mindfulness. Because you know that the power of delusion is very, very strong. Very strong. And of course, this is why the Buddha spoke so highly of the practice of mindfulness. And of course, when we cling to our mental formations, or ideas, concepts, views, and opinions, and of course, beliefs, and we cling to them, we identify with them, it's very hard to let go of them. Because, we cling to these things because they give us a sense of security or a sense of comfort. And of course, because of the ego, my views, my opinions are very important. And we start to argue with somebody, my views and opinions are more important than yours. And of course, my beliefs are reality, your beliefs are not reality. And that's why, religions that are just based on beliefs and ideas, they're always fighting with each other. And this is why the Buddha said you have to practice mindfulness and stop clinging to all these mental formations. Because they are not ultimate truth, they are not ultimate reality, they're just impermanent conditions of the mind. They come and go. But it takes practice. And to be more precise, all the thoughts, mental formations that arise in consciousness, in essence, they are really just electrical impulses in the frontal lobe of the brain. Think about that. Only electrical impulses. So humans have been deluded, for thousands and thousands of years by these electrical impulses. That's all. No solid reality. But again, it takes practice. Because without practice, we're all trapped by all this mental activity, thinking, thoughts, ideas, beliefs, and so on. And I understand the difficulty when we're brought up with certain beliefs, or we adopt certain beliefs that gives us, a sense of security, a sense of comfort. It's very difficult to let go of these beliefs. And this is why, again, the Buddha's teaching is so challenging, because he said, when we investigate, when we train our minds, then we begin to understand something deeper, an intuitive understanding in the heart. And he said, this understanding is not about believing. It's not about believing. When you understand, when you understand something intuitively, there is no need to believe. And of course, this is very difficult for people to understand, because we're so conditioned, that we have to believe something or we don't believe. For example, we don't have to believe that, tonight is going to get dark and tomorrow morning the sun is going to rise and it's going to become light again. We don't have to believe that, do we? Because we know whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. Sun is going to set, get dark, and in the morning it's going to rise and it's going to be daylight again. That's the difference between understanding and believing. And eventually, of course, the sun is going to, explode, but we don't have to worry about that. We still have a few million years to go. But for now, the sun is going to set, the sun is going to rise, whether we like it or not. Because sometimes, even in Canada, I'm walking around on the street and somebody will say, I see you're a Buddhist or a Buddhist monk. So what do you believe? I said, really, I don't really believe. He said, what do you mean? Surely you must believe in the Buddha. Or sometimes they say, I see you're a Buddhist, so you must believe in reincarnation, right? No. And then I explain, it's not about believing, it's about understanding, investigating, training your mind to see things clearly. And there's an understanding, a wisdom that has nothing to do with belief. But again, if you're brought up, with this conditioning that you have to believe something or you don't have to believe something, you cannot understand. this teaching of understanding. This is why I always tell people, if they really, believe in something, they're clinging to this belief because it gives them comfort, a sense of security, and so on. I often say, believe what you want to believe. Doesn't matter what it is. That's your freedom. You can even believe the world is flat. There are some people still believe the world is flat. That's okay. And of course, there are some places on the planet when you go outside, it's really flat. Right? There's not even a bump in the horizon. Yes, there are some places like that. But when you grow up, of always seeing hills or mountains, you can't imagine a place that is so flat. So you can understand why some people believe, that the world is flat. It's like people believed that if you sailed on a boat or a canoe, you kept rowing towards the horizon, eventually you'll reach an edge and of course you'll fall off. That was a very common belief. It's like the sun circled the earth, right? And then finally, someone in Europe said, no, it's the other way around. We are circling the sun. And of course, many people got upset by that. And I think he was even imprisoned or even put to death for realizing the truth of things. It's amazing, the human mind when we cling to something. So the practice of mindfulness is very, very liberating, but it takes effort. Now I'll go back to this teaching of non-duality. That because mindfulness is a state of non-duality, we're able to see things more objectively and let them go. Now what does that mean? It means that the state of awareness or mindfulness, there's no I being aware. There's no I being mindful. There's only that energy of awareness, of mindfulness. Initially, we don't see that. Why? Because we're always identifying with our sense experiences. We say, I'm seeing something, I'm hearing something, I'm tasting something, I'm smelling something, I'm feeling something by touch, and of course I'm thinking. So there's always that state of duality, meaning, subject and object, right? But when you practice, you begin to see that there's no subject, there's no I being aware. There's just that state of awareness, that energy. It's like when you're looking at the speaker, you don't have to make an effort to see the speaker, you just see, right? Do you see that? You're just seeing. Likewise, there's this hearing. You don't have to make a conscious effort to hear the speaker. There's only hearing. And I wonder if you see that. But the moment you say, I am seeing, the speaker, or I'm hearing the speaker, you create duality. You create a subject. The I as the seer, and the I as the listener or the hearer. You see that? But really, awareness or mindfulness is a state of non-duality. But we create a duality when we identify with these experiences. I'm seeing, I'm hearing, I'm smelling something, and of course I'm thinking something. I know initially it's difficult to see this, but once we practice and our minds are quiet, clear, we begin to see this. But it's profound. But once you practice, it becomes very clear. Because the truth is, our senses are sensing by themselves. For example, as I said, you don't have to make an effort to see the speaker or hear the speaker. As long as your eyes are healthy, you just look and they're seeing, seeing consciousness. Hearing consciousness arises. You start eating something and automatically there's tasting. If you doubt this, next time you eat something, maybe this evening when you go home, say to yourself, okay, I am going to eat this thing and I'm going to really try not to taste this. See what happens. You cannot avoid tasting consciousness to arise. As long as you have taste buds on your tongue, tasting will arise. And this is one of the insights of the Buddha. That the senses are actually sensing by themselves. There's really no one behind it. As long as your ears are healthy, sound vibration enters the eardrum vibrates, it gets picked up by the brain, and there's hearing consciousness. It's an automatic process, just like I said, eating is automatic, tasting, smelling, the body touching something. So we create the duality by our habit of identification. Same with feelings and emotions. A happy feeling arises, we say, I am happy. It seems perfectly natural, doesn't it? So that is our social conditioning. I am happy. I am unhappy. I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm disappointed, I'm afraid. I'm bored, I'm feeling lonely. So we by this habit of identification, we naturally hold on to these feelings, these emotions, as something personal. Right? You know, my happiness or my unhappiness. My anger, my frustration, my fear. And that's where the grasping comes in, the grasping mind. Now, what is so interesting is that initially when we say, I am happy, there is no dukkha, no conflict. Why is that? When we say, I am happy, there is no dukkha. But when we say, I am unhappy, of course, there is dukkha. It's very simple, isn't it? Because happiness, or happy, is very pleasant. Right? When we identify with something pleasant or that feels good, initially there is no dukkha because it's pleasant. But when we identify with anything that's unpleasant, you know, upset, anger, frustration, and so on, there's dukkha simply because these are unpleasant states. And of course we hold on to them as something personal. But what is interesting, eventually, when we're very attached to something that is pleasant, that makes us feel happy, eventually we experience frustration. Why? Because anything that feels good, feels pleasant, it doesn't last. It's not permanent, it changes. And that's why frustration eventually is experienced. Because anything that feels good, we want it to be permanent. Anything that feels unpleasant, painful, whether it's physical or emotional, of course we want it to, go away as quick as possible. And what the Dharma is teaching us is that these states, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, they are impermanent. They're uncertain, they're unsatisfactory because they're impermanent and they don't belong to us. They don't belong to us. So in the practice of mindfulness, because it's a state of non-duality, we're able to objectify these feelings and emotions. For example, if anger arises, instead of saying I am angry or I am upset or I'm afraid, we can breathe mindfully and we can say there is a state of anger. There's a state of upset, or there is upset, and there is a state of fear. You see the difference? It's a very big difference in saying I am angry and there is anger. Big difference. Because we're able to see something objectively and there is more space. There's no space. Yes, the anger is there, the fear is there, but we just see it as it is. Not my fear, my anger, my frustration, my boredom, and so on. And then you remind yourself, this too shall pass. It's impermanent. It's just a temporary mental state, a changing condition of the mind. And you come back to a present moment awareness, whatever practice you're doing, and you allow that mental state, that emotion to fade away, to pass away without struggle, without control, without suppression. And now modern psychotherapists are using this method. It's called mindfulness-based psychotherapy. It's quite amazing when you think of it that the Buddha taught this over 2,500 years ago. Just to see something as it is without identifying with it and know it is impermanent. Not me, not mine. And you know these 4 words, this too shall pass, contains the greatest wisdom in human experience. This too shall pass. And it's something that's very good to remind yourself that whatever you're experiencing in the moment is only a temporary mental state. A changing condition of the mind, and of course there's no self, no permanent self. Very beneficial practice. Now Thich Nhat Hanh, you may know who he is, very well known Vietnamese teacher. He has a very delightful way of using mindfulness and mindful smiling in dealing with mental states. For example, say if there's upset, breathing in, I know there's upset in me. Breathing out, I smile. And you smile mindfully. Breathing in, I know there's fear in me. Breathing out, I smile. Breathing in, I know there's craving in me. Breathing out, I smile. It is impermanent. Try that sometime. You see how good it is. Because when we can smile mindfully at something, this smile is a smile of metta, loving kindness. It's a smile of acceptance. We're not judging it. We're not criticizing it. So there's no conflict. We accept, yes, it's there. The anger is there, the fear is there, the craving is there, the frustration, even jealousy. The jealousy is there, you smile. It is there, it is impermanent. And also, why it is so beneficial is that mindful smiling is a very wholesome state of mind, isn't it? Because when you smile, it feels good. It's positive and it helps us to relax. Just like when you laugh. Right? That's why they say laughter is the best medicine. And this is why, laughing yoga is becoming more and more popular now. And people need it here. Places like Singapore, Hong Kong, they really need some laughing yoga. But it really helps you to let go of all this tension, stress, greed, obsession. Always about business, more and more and more, profit gain, Because greed, the energy of greed is just endless. And with all the constant striving, there's always anxiety, fear. The fear of not being successful, the fear of not achieving. So try it sometime, this mindful breathing, mindful smiling. It's a very beneficial practice. And also the practice of keeping calm and not reacting. It takes practice, but when you do it, you begin to see the value of it, the freedom of it. When you don't react to someone's anger or their negativity, just keeping calm. And whenever people get angry with me, I use that as a good opportunity just to keep calm. Because when you don't react to somebody's anger or negativity, you act as a mirror, where you reflect that person's behavior. You see that. Because you're not reacting, that calmness reflects their anger and their negative state. That's right. Try it with your family members. Especially family members, because family members, they know how to push your buttons, right? Because they know you from childhood and they know what can make you upset so easily. Try that with your family members. And when you're able to keep calm and to smile at them, they will learn something from you. Wow, there's something so unusual about you. Because they're expecting you to get angry, right? But when you can keep calm and smile at them, you will really shock them. And I think too, if somebody's angry with you and you're able to keep calm and mindful and to smile, when you don't react to somebody's anger, you can see that they're suffering. But if you get angry yourself, then you don't see that, then because both of you are suffering, right? Both of you are angry. But if you can remain calm, you can see that that person is suffering. And when you see that that person is suffering, automatically compassion will arise. And out of compassion, you naturally want to improve the situation. Because you're able not to react to that person's anger or negativity. And I think one good thing you can do is to say to that person, I'm really sorry that you're, very angry or upset. Please tell me what I did or what I said to make you angry or upset. Because maybe you did do something, or you did say something, but you're not aware of it. And if you're blameworthy, then you say, I'm really sorry, please forgive me. And if you're without blame, and very often it's a misunderstanding. Have you noticed that? It's so easy for misunderstandings to arise, right? In human relationship. Misunderstandings happen all the time. And if it's a misunderstanding, you make the effort to clarify that misunderstanding. And you find that when you do, of course, both parties feel much better, right? Much more positive. Because you realize it's only a misunderstanding. You know, once I had a friend, he was working for this company, just a three-month project. And his supervisor at this project was a lady, and she was obviously having personal problems at home. And every morning she would come to work, and she would just start bitching at everyone. You know that word, bitching? Yeah. In North America, everyone knows that word. I'm not sure about Malaysia. You know, just being unpleasant, being unprofessional, just bitching. And she wasn't aware of her behavior. You know, she was just acting out, you know, her anger, her frustration. Maybe at her husband, family member, or children, or whatever. Not professional, but as I said, she was not aware of her behavior, just acting out. So my friend asked me, could I suggest something? How to deal with such a challenging person? So I thought for a moment and said, yeah, I have a suggestion, and of course, you can try it. I said the important thing is that you don't get angry at this person. Because sometimes you're tempted, right, to tell somebody off when they're being, so unpleasant, so unprofessional. You keep calm, and one morning when she's in that unpleasant mood, just say to her calmly, I'm really sorry that you're not feeling well today. Please tell me how I can help you. And he did. Very calmly, he said, I'm really sorry that you're not feeling well today. Please tell me how I can help you. And he called me about 2 days later, and he said, thank you, Bhante, it really helped a lot. Because first, by saying to her calmly, I'm really sorry that you're not feeling well today, she became aware of her mental state. But she wasn't aware of it, she was just acting out. No awareness, no mindfulness. And then by saying with kindness, please tell me how I can help you. She responded to that kindness, because obviously she was suffering, right? And her attitude changed. So maybe you can try that the next time you're dealing with someone difficult. Just say, I'm really sorry that you're not feeling well today. Please tell me how I can help you. You may know this very well-known story, but I always like to tell it, about how the Buddha, he was given a teaching one day, of course in the forest, and this man got really angry about something the Buddha said. And he stood up and he started to shout at the Buddha, just shouting, and calling him all the curse words he could think of. And the rest of the audience were shocked by this man's behavior, especially in such a peaceful environment. There are birds and peacocks and deer, very peaceful, and this man was just livid, completely irrational. So naturally they looked to the Buddha to see how he would deal or react to this very angry person. And the Buddha sat calmly and just smiled at him. Do you know the story? Just smiled. And the man got even more angry because, he was expecting the Buddha, to argue with him, because that's what he wanted, He wanted a fight. But the Buddha just smiled. And eventually the man just stood there, huffing and puffing, completely exhausted, by his, ranting and raving. And of course, by then he had run out of all the curse words he could think of. Because, each language only has certain, a limited amount of curse words, right? Just stood there, completely confused, completely exhausted. By the Buddha's calmness and just smiling. And then the Buddha said to him, "Tell me, sir, if somebody is offering you a present, a gift, and you refuse to accept it, who would the gift belong to?" And the man was initially surprised that the Buddha would ask him such a rational question, after his very irrational behavior. He thought for a moment, and then he said, "Well, since I've refused to accept, the gift, then of course it will still belong to the person who is trying to give the gift." A rational answer to a rational question. And then the Buddha said, "Well, sir, in the same way, I have not accepted your anger and all your curse words, and so they all belong to you." What an amazing answer. And because it was such an amazing answer, the man suddenly had an awakening, and he realized that the problem all along was not Buddha, but it was here, his own mental state. And of course, ego, the ego, pride, the arrogance. He became awakened to that by the Buddha's extraordinary answer. And he apologized to the Buddha, thanked the Buddha, and he sat down quietly. I remember once I was conducting a short retreat in Hong Kong many years ago. It was during Easter holiday, a long weekend. And my friend, a local Hong Kong monk, had built this retreat center, out in the new territories, more quiet, away from the Kowloon area. And during the retreat, I was just giving a talk, and this young man from Taiwan became very upset, just fussing, something very minor. We're just upset about something. He was originally from Vietnam. Vietnamese Chinese. So he spoke Cantonese and Mandarin, no English. But I had a good translator for Cantonese, a high school teacher, very good Dharma practitioner. So I listened patiently, and then I said to him, "Do I know you and do you know me?" And he kind of, yeah. So I said, most people here I don't know. And I certainly don't know you, and you don't know me. And I said, I only know the monk who built the center, and I know my translator, the high school teacher. Of course, he just looked puzzled, but I'm trying to say. And then I said, because I don't know you and you don't know me, why should I say something specially to make you upset? Because I don't know you. But here you are fussing about something so trivial. So I said, the problem is not what I said, but your reaction to it. You're taking it so personally. Maybe it triggered some unpleasant memory from childhood, or in your school, or in your work environment. And you're reacting and fussing, taking it so personally. And I realized he was very new to practice, and maybe this was the first retreat he was attending. And I think he was there just because somebody, brought him. And I said, this is what the practice is about. Learning to be mindful, learning not to react so easily, and not to take things so personally. Because we're all going to die one day. You think about that. And then he calmed down. There's a very well-known story. You might have heard of it. And it's something that actually happened during the Buddha's time. I think it was about the 9th or 10th year of the Buddha's teaching. And by then, the Sangha had grown considerable because, his reputation as this very profound, radical teacher, had spread. And what happened was an event took place that threatened the Sangha. And it all started with two monks starting an argument about one of the minor precepts. But these two monks, they'd love to argue. And clinging to their, point of view. The ego was there. And they wouldn't let it go. Every day they kept arguing. And more monks joined in, and they would take sides, So the two opposing groups got bigger and bigger, and the argument continued. And they're getting more angry, more heated, more deluded. And one day the Buddha stepped in and tried to get them to stop arguing, but they were so heated, so deluded, they just ignored the Buddha. And the Buddha quietly went to another forest a few kilometers away. Now the following morning, as is tradition, they all went alms round, right, to all the villages. And the villagers said, where is the Buddha? Because they knew he was in that area. And they were looking forward to offering him dana, to receive his blessing, and so on. So the monks told the villagers what had happened. So we tried to step in and try to stop the argument, but they wouldn't listen to him because they were so heated, so deluded. And the villagers did a wonderful thing. They went on strike. And they said, since you're so disrespectful and you're so deluded to your teacher, no dana for you. And they quickly spread the word to the other villages. Don't give the monks dana. So that was an incredible thing. Now for these monks, their lives were so austere, so simple, they could manage, without food for one day. But by the second day, third day, the pain of hunger got stronger and stronger. In Sri Lanka, the word for hunger means badegini, which means fire in the stomach. It's a good way of describing hunger. And of course, the pain of hunger after several days finally woke them up, and they realized, how deluded, how immature, and how disrespectful they were towards their great teacher. In other words, they came to their senses. So they went to see the Buddha, and they apologized, and they asked for forgiveness. And the Buddha said, on a daily basis, you have to meditate on the truth of impermanence and the certainty of death. Because when you do that, you see that all the things you're clinging to and your arguments and fights, how meaningless it is in the light of impermanence and the certainty of death. And he concluded by saying, of all mindfulness practices, that on death is supreme. Very interesting story.
Can you repeat the last line?
Sorry?
Can you repeat the last line?
Of all mindfulness meditation or practice, that on death is supreme. Like it is the highest form of mindfulness practice. that reflection on the certainty of death. Because it puts into perspective all the things that we're fussing about, being angry about, wanting to, argue, wanting to fight about. You see how utterly meaningless it is. Now, at this time, would you have any questions? Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
The question is loving kindness. Is it a prerequisite to have a meditative mind, or can somebody practice like indifferent or equanimity?
Equanimity.
Equanimity, yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Is it Bhante?
So what is the question regarding equanimity?
I have a question. People have different character.
Yes.
Like, I cannot practice maybe loving kindness always, or something like that. Or is it possible to have an indifferent mind, equanimity, or something else? Can you please explain?
Okay. Equanimity doesn't mean that you're totally detached and you're totally indifferent, because the compassion is there, but it's just that you're not reacting in your habitual way. So in other words, if things needs to be done, or if somebody needs your help, or say a child is in danger, you're able to respond with compassion, with wisdom. You see the difference? Again, the difference between reacting and responding. This might answer your question. There's a wonderful story, maybe you've heard of it, and this actually is a true story, about the Japanese monk. And in Japan there are a lot of fishing villages, right, by the coast. And this one monk was just living at the edge of one of these fishing villages. And he was known for, his virtue, very virtuous monk, very simple, very virtuous. And close, not too far away, at the edge of the village, there was this young family, a small family, I mean. Mother, father, and they had a beautiful young daughter. She was about 17 years old. And one day, her parents discovered that she was pregnant. Of course, they got very angry, started to scold her, and demanded to know which man did this. And she just cried and cried, feeling very guilty, of course. But she refused to reply. She wanted to protect this person. And every day, they kept bugging her, who did this steal, blah, blah, blah. She kept crying and crying. And eventually, she said, it's the monk. This monk did it. So you can imagine, they were very surprised, because he was known for, his virtue and so on. They were all so shocked. Of course, she was lying. Because, because she was under so much pressure, right? Poor monk, yeah. But luckily, the story is about, he was a very well-practiced monk. And this is a wonderful story about equanimity. So they quickly spread the word around the village what this terrible monk has done. Before he was very virtuous, now he's very terrible, very evil. And they all went to his village, shouting, cursing him. Some people, start throwing stones. And the monk realized, of course, these people are so angry, so irrational, they won't believe that he's telling the truth, that he's innocent. So he just get equanimous. And all he said to them was, "Is that so? Is that so?" And he wasn't angry with the young lady. Of course, he knew she had lied, but because he was very compassionate, he understood why she had lied. But he just kept equanimous. And by then, you can imagine, his reputation just, down to zero. And everyone giving him, nasty, mean looks. They refused to speak with him. They shunned him. But he kept calm. And 9 months later, she had the baby, a little baby boy. And after, breastfeeding him for a few days, her parents took the baby away from her and says, "We don't want this bastard grandchild," because she's unmarried, right? And being in a conservative society, to be an unwed mother is really, like a disgrace, right? We don't want him, this bastard grandchild. And they took the baby and gave it to the monk and says, "Here, it's yours, you look after it." But he kept calm, and all he said was, "Is that so?" He kept calm, humble. And he was able to get milk and took care of the baby. Great patience. And after about a year, by then, he's learning to walk full of energy. And the young mother, the young lady, confessed, because obviously she was feeling very guilty all this time. She finally confessed to her parents that she had lied, and the father of the child was this young man who worked in the fish market. And the good news is that they were planning to get married, and they wanted to raise their son like a proper family. So her parents, of course, were very happy, and happy to hear that they were going to get married, you see. So they quickly went to the monk's hut, and they asked for forgiveness, and they wanted their grandchild back, because they were going to get married. The child would no longer be a bastard. That thinking. And the monk just quietly handed over now he's a young boy, and all he said was, "Is that so?" Is that so? It's a beautiful story, just to show you, the virtue of equanimity. Obviously, he was very compassionate too. It's a beautiful story when somebody has so much faith in what is truth. What is truth. It's a very beautiful story. There's a story about the mind, when the Buddha said, everything is from the mind. The mind is the forerunner, consciousness. And one time, these two students of this great Zen master from China, he was known as Master Huineng, the sixth Zen patriarch, very well known Zen master. Very sharp, intuitive mind, and also he was illiterate, because he didn't have a chance to go to school. His father died very young, very poor, and he just had to support his mother by going into the forest, cutting wood, selling wood, in the market. But he had this sharp, intuitive mind, and eventually he was recognized and appointed to be the sixth Zen master, Master Huineng. So two of his students, by this time he became famous. He was in Guangdong province. And two of his students happened to be walking outside the monastery, and they see the flag in the wind, and they started an argument. And one student says, "You look, it's the flag that's moving, it's not the wind." And the other student said, No, you look carefully, it's the wind that is moving, it's not the flag. So they keep arguing, flag moving, not wind, wind moving, not flag. They're not getting anywhere. And Master Huineng happened to be walking by. I said, "Oh, Master, we're so happy to see you. My friend and I are having this argument, we're not getting anywhere. Please help us with this argument." Who is right, who is wrong? Master Huining looks very sharp mind, and he said, it's not the flank that's moving. It's not the wind that's moving. It is your mind that is moving. Wonderful, wonderful. And then another Zen master comes along and he says, what flag? What wind? What mind? Wonderful. You can't get more profound than that. Meaning, flag, wind, mind are just labels. That's what it means. Don't get attached to labels, to words. Very profound. But with awareness, when you trust awareness and intuitive knowing, which is the Buddha or Buddha nature, we're able to go beyond the limitations of labels and words. Yes, any other questions? Yes.
Bhante, this Sunday, remember, you told us you want to share with us awareness on the illusion of happy birthday.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Last Sunday, Bhante said want to share with us the illusion of happy birthday.
Oh. Aha. I think you'll have to wait until this is your opportunity to practice the virtue of patience. It's about the Buddha's cure for sickness, aging, and death. And when he found this cure, he was also able to find a cure for birth. And initially it's very confusing, like how is that possible, right? How is that possible? But when you hear the teaching, then you understand. It's a wonderful teaching.
I like to ask pertaining to meditation. It's just now you say that when thoughts arise, you say thoughts, okay? But
Or thinking.
or
Yeah.
So if it's like that, as you are momentary, you will stop, but then it will come again. But throughout your whole meditation, you are just laboring. Then how to progress from that?
That's why it's good to have other forms of mindfulness. Not just using breathing, but you can do the hand movements. You can get up and you do the walking. And if there are emotions involved, you can do the Qigong. This is why I do Qigong, because it's a form of dynamic mindfulness. And it's very simple. And you're able to be really in the present moment, and you can let go of emotional stress, whatever, frustration, whatever. So it's good to know other practices. Because I know sometimes just sitting and just dealing with this stuff, it's not easy. It can be exhausting. Thank you for asking, because I just remembered a very good story. A few years ago, I was in New Zealand at a Sri Lankan temple. And they had to move the temple because of the earthquake. 2011, there were 2 earthquakes. It was the same year where they had the Japanese tsunami, you remember? Yeah. It was that year, they had 2 earthquakes. And the roads were badly damaged because it was very soft. And the scientific term is called liquefaction. Is when the soil is so soft during an earthquake, it just crumbles. Liquefaction. So the roads were really badly damaged, and that's why the Sri Lanka temple had to be closed. The building was okay, 1 or 2 cracks, but it's the roads. Anyway, we had a one day of mindfulness, and there was a lady there who was terribly unhappy. Terribly. And she told everyone, the cause of her unhappiness. So one lady related to me why this lady was so unhappy. But of course, the lady was sitting there, but a friend told me. And the cause of her unhappiness was she had a son and a daughter. The son was living with her, but the son, who was 25, decided to move out, live on his own, and he had a girlfriend. And he refused to visit her. Because you see, the father had died fairly young. He had a heart attack when the kids were young, and it was very difficult for her looking after 2 young children and so being so far away from Sri Lanka, where all the rest of her family were. So it was very difficult. And she made the mistake of spoiling him rotten. Because, she felt sorry for him that, he's without a father, so I must, look after him, but she made the mistake of spoiling him rotten. And when you spoil a child rotten, when they grow up, they're not very good human beings. They're very selfish, very demanding, right? Like this, very immature. So the son was like that. And, and always blaming her, oh, you didn't buy me this, you didn't get me this, that type of thing. And apparently the son's girlfriend was also very insecure and very controlling. Fortunately, her daughter was very different, very kind, very supportive. So I said to this lady, you cannot depend on your son for your happiness. You have to be patient, and maybe in the future he'll become more mature, and then he might decide to see you. But for now, you can't depend on him for your happiness. I said, fortunately, you should be grateful that your daughter is with you, and she's very kind, very supportive. You have to be grateful for that. And then I said something to her that she was not expecting, because she thought that I was going to support her emotionally. And I was going to say, oh, you poor lady, you're right. Your son, should be visiting you. But I didn't do that. And that's why I said, you can't depend on your son for your happiness. And what I said to her was, what is really causing you suffering is not your son per se, but is your obsessive thoughts about your son not coming to visit you. I said, that is what the teaching is about. When you practice mindfulness, you see the dukkha, you see the suffering here. That is what is causing the suffering. It's in the mind. And she had never heard this teaching before. And interestingly enough, this story has a happy ending. After the discussion, we went outside, beautiful weather, and we did the Qigong. Movement, laughing. And what is interesting, she completely changed. And everyone saw the change in her, because she was so unhappy, obsessing, about her son. But by doing the Qigong, she was able to let go of those obsessive thoughts. And for the first time in a long time, she was able to experience just the joy of just moving and breathing. It was really wonderful. And people really saw the change in her. Just by letting go. Because that's what mindfulness practice is about. To see dukkha and learning to let it go. Because eventually it's all here, isn't it? It's all in the mind, based on thinking. For that's where the clinging is to. And why the mind clings so strongly is because it's based on memory. This is why it has been said that happiness is having good health and a bad memory. We forget, especially unpleasant things. So good memory can be a blessing, and it can also be a curse if we don't know how to let go of dukkha. Yes, any other questions? Yes.
Okay, this is what you say about Buddhists believe about the reincarnation, the sixth realm. Can you explain more about this? Because a lot of Buddhists, they still a bit hard to believe on this, and also the non-Buddhists, they even don't believe on this.
Yes.
Yeah. Then this I was shocked that.
It's very simple. Because too many Buddhists are clinging to ideas, concepts, beliefs. And this is why I say, if you really love this belief, if that belief is giving you, some form of security, comfort, keep your belief. But what is more important is present moment, mindfulness, awareness. You understand? I always tell people, believe what you want to believe. But in the end, it's mindfulness, present moment awareness. And I can tell you from experience, one day I had a very dramatic experience in letting go. And I really wish everyone could have such a dramatic experience, but it's not possible. The second year I was at my teacher's temple. At the early part of the second year, the weather turned really strange. It was, in the tropics you get regular rainfall, but it was really dry, no rain. So during the day it was really hot, really uncomfortable. Even the paddy fields, many rice fields were, drying up. Very unusual. So I wasn't feeling very calm, very equanimous. And by then I got tired of the diet, every day is the same thing. Rice and curry, rice and curry. Then I started to have all these cravings for makan in Malaysia, in Singapore. I wanted Western food, spaghetti, pizza, frozen yogurt. Not possible. So I'm going to my teachers to the main temple to have lunch. Same rice and curry. Just a few steps, I'm walking up, and while I'm climbing the step, I just see a movement at the right corner of my eye. I didn't know what it was, but instinctively I just stopped. And I looked down. Psst, cobra. Ready to strike. Luckily I hadn't stepped on it, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. And when I realized what it was, believe me, I became wide awake. I've never been so awake in my life. All my nerve endings were totally at attention, totally in the present moment. And because I was so alert, so awake, all that dukkha, all that nonsense in my mind, zoom, it's gone. Instant letting go. I wish you all could have this experience. Without the bite, of course, without the bite. It was extraordinary. It's like we're communicating without words, and we're totally in the present moment. The same time, the same intensity. It was incredible. Fortunately, snakes are very shy. They don't want to hang around. It quickly turned, and it headed off into the bush. And I'm standing there in this very awake state of being. And at the back of the cobra, the hood, there's a marking. And for one thing, it still amazes me when I think of the experience, how a creature can move so fast without legs. Think of it. And when I saw the markings, because I was in such a heightened state of awareness, of attention, I suddenly saw how beautiful it was. Really, I could admire the beauty of it. Yes, potentially very dangerous, but I could see the beauty of it. There was no aversion, no hatred. Such an awakened state. And before I knew it, it just disappeared in the bush. And I just stood there. Of course, I felt very relieved that I wasn't bitten, but I was in such a heightened state. The whole environment, everything just became vibrant. You know, the colors, just vibrant, because you're so awakened, totally in the present moment. I remember that. It was like being a child again, you know, in the tropics. Because I spent most of my childhood outdoors in the tropics. Just like everything, and you're in a sense of awe, just the beauty of things. And just feeling the joy of just being alive. Yes.
Bhante, how to develop that sort of awareness as what you have spoken? Now you're just walking and you see, you know, a snake, and suddenly you say that, you know, you're able to pick up so many things while just seeing the snakes. Then you can see it's changing, it had marks, it's beautiful, you know, it moves so fast, but in front of you it's just a snake, but you're able to pick up so many things. How do we develop to pick up that sort of awareness?
To answer your question, the only thing I can think of, I wish I could carry a cobra snake with me around this planet. You see, for me, it was, I mean, it wasn't planned, obviously. It was something spontaneous. And believe me, the snake was right there. You know, it was in striking, it was right there. What you call a very close encounter. And I was even surprised how I was able just to stay alert instead of freaking out. Because some people would have just freaked out, right? And screamed or, you know, tried to run or whatever. But I just stood there, completely awake. But of course, I had been practicing too. So that there was a sense of, you know, focus and whatever. But of course, when you see danger, you see it.
But what I'm trying to ask is that how can we develop that sort of knowing into, I mean, the seeing into the awareness? How to train it to, you know, to pick up all these things?
That's a good question. Just being on a retreat, you know, going for longer retreats. Because, you know, initially, you know, when you're coming from a busy life, you know, it takes a few days just to calm down, you know, to appreciate the present moment. And also to let go of your smartphone. Right? To observe the craving, right? To want to check your smartphone. Because I know it's a big attachment these days for people. And you're looking at somebody, I don't have a smartphone. And only in Malaysia, I finally use a cell phone, and I have the Nokia, you know, the dinosaur model. So a dinosaur is using a dinosaur model phone. That's me. But I think the retreat helps because, you know, once you get all that anxiety and present and past and future, you really calm down and you're really in the present moment. You really appreciate the present moment. And you realize there is only the present moment. But you know, when you're busy, you're in the working world, schedule, planning, all that is lost. So very often people would ask me, how did the Buddha manage to have such profound insights? And part of it, of course, you know, the quality of his mind, but I think equally important, his lifestyle. Very simple. In the forest, there was no shopping centers. He didn't have a credit card. He didn't have a watch, Seiko watch. He didn't have internet, and most importantly, he didn't have a cell phone. Think of it. Can you imagine if he had a cell phone? His father would be calling him every few days, scolding him, "You stupid boy, you come back here. You're a prince," you know? And can you imagine his wife? Every day she would be calling, crying, of course. You know, the emotional pull. And your son, Rahula, is crying for you. Please come home. He wants his daddy. Right? Think of it. Does that answer your question? it's really living that life, really calm, very in that quiet. And your mind is very silent, very spacious. And I was very fortunate. The second year I was in India, I didn't have visa restrictions, and I was able to spend 2 consecutive summers up in northern India. I was a lay practitioner at the time, and I was able to live for those 2 summers with natural time, which is very rare these days. Natural time means no schedule. I didn't have to work. I didn't have a Seiko watch, there was no internet, so I didn't have to say, ayo, I have to go check email now. I would do writing, And of course, no cell phone. It was an incredible opportunity when you live that life, which is natural, because you get a taste of what the forest monks live like that. Your life is very simple, and I remember everything I did was just calm and slow. Not deliberately, but it just happened, because you're not in a hurry to do anything. And I remember just picking some of the local like wild vegetables, in a basket, on the hillside. And I'm just picking. And I can't describe that experience. You experience a bliss beyond imagination, just picking vegetables. Because you're very calm, you're very present, and that's all there is. It's only picking. And you go beyond that duality, of I am picking vegetables. It is only picking. It was just a timeless, wonderful experience, because your life is so simple. It was a very fortunate experience that I was able to do that. Your mind is very quiet, very spacious. Because awareness is spacious by nature. But we don't see that space because we're always thinking, but there's no space there.